The wine glass felt steady in my hand, a stark contrast to the buzz of anticipation thrumming just under my skin. Across the table, illuminated by the soft, flickering glow of a single candle, Ethan raised his own glass. It was our 7th anniversary, and he was wearing the same devastating smile that had first made me fall for him, a smile that now just made my stomach clench. "To us, Chloe," he toasted, his voice a low, intimate murmur. He was completely oblivious to the fact that I had already orchestrated his end. He believed this night was a culmination, a final step, and in a way, he was right. It would be his, but before we get into the tangled story of how our fairy tale marriage spiraled into a meticulously planned crime, I just want to say thank you for being here for this journey. If you appreciate stories filled with twists and a little bit of dark justice, I'd be so grateful if you hit that subscribe button. It costs nothing, but it helps this channel tremendously and guarantees you won't miss what comes next. All right, let's get into it. 7 years. It's astonishing how a span of time can so completely warp the very fabric of a life, twisting love into hate, trust into suspicion, and a soul into something unrecognizable. I can still conjure the exact moment we met, as if it were a scene preserved in amber. It wasn't a bookstore, but a quiet, sun-drenched art gallery on a crisp autumn afternoon. I was mesmerized by a small, moody seascape, a canvas of churning gray waves under a stormy sky. As my fingers hovered just above the artist's signature, another hand reached for the same frame. Our fingers brushed. His eyes, the color of that very storm on the canvas, crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "A tempestuous soul, I see," he'd said, his voice smooth as velvet. "It should belong to someone who appreciates its beauty." He insisted I buy it, and I fell head first for his easy charm and those words that felt as if they were written just for me. Our courtship felt like something out of a classic film, a perfectly choreographed romance. But I was the only one who didn't know the steps were rehearsed. There were spontaneous weekend trips to boutique hotels nestled in Napa Valley, surprise picnics in fields of wildflowers that seemed to exist only for us, and reservations at restaurants so exclusive you needed an inn just to get on the wait list. Ethan was an expert at making a woman feel like the center of the universe, special enough to overlook the subtle, almost imperceptible signs. The way his gaze would linger a little too long on my family's estate during visits, the calculating glint that would flash in his eyes before being replaced by a look of adoration, the casual questions about trusts and inheritance, disguised as playful curiosity about my future. The proposal happened on a cliffside terrace in Big Sur, the Pacific Ocean, a brilliant sapphire stretching out below us as he dropped to one knee. The ring, he explained, was his great-grandmother's, a family heirloom passed down through generations. I would learn much, much later that it was purchased from a high-end estate auction in New York, its previous owner, a mystery he had no intention of solving for me. But on that night, under the moon, it sparkled with nothing but the promise of forever. Our wedding was a spectacle, the social event of the year. We were married at my family's historic botanical garden, the glass conservatory draped in thousands of white orchids and fairy lights. A string quartet played softly as we said our vows under an archway heavy with blossoms. I could still feel the weight of the platinum band as Ethan slid it onto my finger, his touch impossibly gentle, his whispered promises of forever tasting like honey and lies. The first year was a portrait of marital bliss, or at least my interpretation of it. Ethan was the consummate husband, endlessly attentive and deeply thoughtful. He'd bring me coffee in bed every morning the way I liked it. He remembered the anniversary of our first date, our first kiss, our first everything, and celebrated them with small, meaningful gifts. My friends watched us with a mixture of awe and envy, dubbing us the perfect couple. If only they knew his perfection was a performance, one he had honed over many years and many lives. Looking at him now, bathed in the soft, expensive glow of the Serafina's private dining room, I can finally see the master actor for what he is. I see the almost imperceptible way he taps his wedding ring against the table when he's agitated, a nervous tic I've come to recognize. I see the slight tremor in his hand as he reaches for his water, a flicker of anxiety he quickly masters. He is on edge tonight despite his cool exterior. After 7 years of being his primary subject of study, I've learned to read his every subtle cue. "You look exquisite tonight," he says, his voice laced with that familiar warmth that once made my heart flutter. Now I only hear the carefully constructed melody, the manipulative harmony in each syllable. My dress, a simple but elegant black sheath, was his choice. It brings out the luster of your pearls, my love. The pearls were his gift to me just last month, likely intended to be the final adornment for my corpse. I take another slow sip of wine, my eyes locked on his over the crystal rim. The vintage is a rare Bordeaux, a bottle we'd been saving since our wedding. Ethan had insisted we open it for this special occasion, his own little flourish for what he imagined would be my final night on Earth. The sheer audacity of the irony is breathtaking. "Do you remember our first date?" he asks, swirling the deep crimson liquid in his glass. "Of course I do. This very restaurant, this very table." He had ordered an obscenely expensive champagne back then, though I'd been too swept up in his presence to drink more than a few sips. "You hardly touched your food," he chuckles, his hand reaching across the table to cover mine. "You were so adorably shy." I let his fingers intertwine with my own, forcing a soft, nostalgic smile to my lips. "You made me nervous," I reply, "and it's the truest thing I've said all night. You were so charming, so sophisticated. I couldn't figure out what you saw in me." His thumb traces slow circles on the back of my hand, a gesture that used to send a delicious shiver down my spine. How could I not be interested? You were everything I'd ever been searching for. I was young, from a wealthy and respected family, and utterly blindly trusting. I was the perfect mark, but he made one critical miscalculation. He never considered that a love as deep as mine, when betrayed so profoundly, could freeze into something as hard and sharp as a diamond. And a heart encased in ice can hold its resolve far longer than one burning with passion. The waiter glides to our table with our starters, momentarily breaking the spell. As Ethan retracts his hand, I see him cast a furtive glance at his Rolex. He's checking the time. He's on a schedule. He just doesn't know that the clock he's watching is counting down his own final minutes. I raise my glass, my smile a perfect, polished mirror of his own. "To 7 unforgettable years," I say, my voice steady as he lifts his glass to meet mine. The crystal sings, a clear, bell-like note that hangs in the air like a final amen. Yes, unforgettable indeed. The truth began to claw its way into the light 3 months ago, on a Tuesday afternoon so drenched in rain, it felt like the sky was weeping. Ethan was away on another one of his business trips, his 4th that month. I was tidying his home office, a space he was strangely territorial about, when I felt an odd catch in the rug beneath the leg of his antique mahogany desk. He'd always said it came from his family's estate, another prop in his elaborate stage play. Driven by a sudden, inexplicable suspicion, I moved the heavy desk. Beneath the rug, flush with the floorboards, was a small, nearly invisible seam. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Years of unwavering trust began to fracture as my fingers found the hidden latch and pressed. A section of the floor clicked open, revealing a recessed compartment. Inside was a dark green leather portfolio, stuffed so full its contents seemed desperate to escape. My hands trembled as I lifted it out. Bank statements, property deeds, insurance policies. But it was the stack of photographs tucked in the back that made the world tilt on its axis. 3 women, Jessica in San Francisco, Emily in Miami, Madison in Chicago, all of them beautiful with the same trusting smiles and wealthy aura as me. Each of them stood beside Ethan in wedding photos, but in each photo, he was a different man with a different name, and each woman had vanished without a trace within 2 years of her marriage, leaving her entire fortune to her grieving, devoted husband. The room spun, the pieces of the puzzle snapping together with sickening clicks. His insistence on joint bank accounts, the subtle, steady pressure for me to amend my will in his favor, the new vitamin supplements he'd started adding to my nightly cup of tea, insisting they would help with my recent fatigue. The weight of his betrayal was a physical force, crushing the air from my lungs as I sank into his plush, leather chair. The rain beat against the window panes, a frantic, drumming warning that had come far too late. That evening when he called, I laughed at his jokes and told him I missed him, my voice a perfect imitation of the loving wife he thought he knew. But inside, a glacial cold was spreading through my veins, encasing my heart in a protective layer of ice. I spent the next several nights poring over the documents, memorizing account numbers, tracing the flow of money, and studying his pattern. Ethan Sterling was a phantom, a predator who moved from one city to the next, leaving a trail of broken hearts and emptied vaults. The next morning, I began to build a ghost of my own. I started my own intricate dance of deception. My first step was hiring a private investigator, telling her I was vetting a potential partner for a new philanthropic venture. I chose Ava Chen, a woman whose reputation for thoroughness was matched only by her discretion. She was sharp, unflappable, and most importantly, someone Ethan would never see as a threat. Within a few weeks, Ava's reports confirmed my worst fears and uncovered even more. Ethan's business trips were a complex web of meetings with offshore bankers and liquidation lawyers. Each of his previous wives had exhibited the same mysterious symptoms before they disappeared: persistent fatigue, dizzy spells, and memory lapses. Their cases were all cold, officially ruled as unfortunate accidents or sudden illnesses, while their grieving widower quietly drained their assets and vanished. With this knowledge, I started watching him with new, sharpened eyes. I saw the way he'd test my memory, casually asking about details from our early courtship. I noticed how he meticulously documented my declining health in carefully worded emails to my physician. I overheard his concerned phone calls to my mother, where he'd speak in hushed tones about my growing forgetfulness. He was constructing a narrative brick by brick, laying the foundation for my eventual tragic demise. The most chilling discovery of all was hidden on his personal laptop, the one he believed was protected by an unbreakable password. Inside a hidden folder, I found a clinical, detailed timeline. My accident was scheduled for the night of our 7th anniversary. Ethan, it turned out, had a flair for the symbolic. My nightly routine changed. I'd pretend to drink the herbal tea he so lovingly prepared, then dispose of it the moment he left the room. I began taking microscopic doses of the substance I found in a small, locked box in his private safe. I was building an immunity, dose by painstaking dose, all while maintaining the outward appearance of a woman slowly wasting away. He would watch me with that practiced, concerned gaze that I now recognized as cold calculation. Every sympathetic touch was a silent assessment of his progress. "You should get some rest, my love," he'd murmur, tucking me into bed as if I were a fragile doll. "You're looking so pale." His fingers would brush my cheek, a gesture I once found tender, now feeling for a fever, checking his work. I would offer a weak smile, playing my part in his macabre theater while a silent, furious inferno raged within me. During the day, I was a whirlwind of covert activity. I established new private bank accounts under my great-grandmother's maiden name. I made copies of every piece of evidence, distributing them across several secure digital and physical locations. I composed a detailed dossier of Ethan's entire operation and sent it to a trusted childhood friend, a lawyer, with strict instructions that it be opened only in the event of my death or disappearance. Tonight, watching him sip his poisoned wine across our anniversary table, I have to marvel at his sheer composure. He genuinely believes he is moments away from victory, that his masterpiece of a plan is unfolding without a hitch. And perhaps that arrogance is why he grew careless, why he failed to notice the subtle shift in my demeanor, the flicker of steel beneath the fragile facade I presented to the world. The waiter returns to take our orders for the main course. Ethan orders for both of us, as he always does these days, claiming he knows what my delicate constitution can handle. I see the corner of his mouth twitch, the ghost of a triumphant smirk as he performs his role as the doting husband. He has no idea that every concerned glance, every gentle touch, every single manipulative word has only served to temper my resolve into something unbreakable. I raise my glass again, admiring the way the candlelight fractures through the deep red liquid. "To us," I whisper, and I watch him drink deeply, savoring what he believes is his moment of triumph. The rules have changed, my darling husband, and it was my move. Revenge, I learned, is a dish best served with excruciating patience. In the 6 months after uncovering Ethan's treachery, I became a student of a very dark art. My conservatory, once a place of simple pleasure, became my laboratory. I cultivated a garden of lethal beauties, each plant chosen for its unique properties. Monkshood with its alluring purple flowers, hemlock with its delicate lace-like leaves, belladonna, the beautiful lady, with berries as dark and deadly as my husband's heart, nature's most potent poisons, all wrapped in breathtaking beauty, just like the man I married. I sought out the guidance of a retired botany professor, Dr. William Harding, who lived a reclusive life on the edge of town. I told him I was researching a book on historical herbal remedies, and he was thrilled to find a captive audience for his encyclopedic knowledge. He never suspected my interest was in toxicology, not healing. We'd spend long afternoons in his dusty library, my notebook filling with precise measurements and chemical compositions. "You see, my dear," he told me once, peering over his spectacles, "the line between a cure and a poison is often nothing more than a single drop. It is all in the dosage." His words became my mantra as I worked in my garden, each leaf and petal a note in the symphony of justice I was composing. At home, the rhythm of our life continued uninterrupted. We hosted our weekly dinner parties, attended charity galas where Ethan would accept praise for his generosity, and went on romantic dates where he would hold my hand and speak of our future. I played the part of the devoted, ailing wife to perfection. He'd kiss my forehead and tell our friends how brave I was, how gracefully I was handling my mysterious illness. I would just smile weakly, letting his ego swell with the success of his deception. "You are so good to me," I'd whisper as he helped me to bed, watching the self-satisfied gleam in his eyes. Every feigned dizzy spell, every carefully staged moment of weakness was a calculated move. I was building my own timeline right alongside his, a deadly pas de deux of preparation and pretense. The most difficult part wasn't the meticulous planning or the long hours of research. It was the daily performance of ignorance. It was listening to him spin fantasies about our future travels, knowing he intended for me to be in a grave. It was feeling his hands on me and having to suppress the memory of how I once cherished his touch. It was forcing a laugh at his jokes while picturing the faces of Jessica, Emily, and Madison, all silent now, all forgotten by the world, but not by me. My daily routine became my cover. My morning restorative walks were actually disguised meetings with Ava, my investigator. My afternoon naps were spent studying the interactions of chemical compounds. My shopping trips to the city gave me the opportunity to set up untraceable accounts and secure the documents for a new identity. The immunity protocol was the most grueling challenge. Starting with doses so small they were almost immeasurable, I gradually increased my body's tolerance to the compound Ethan was using. There were nights I was racked with nausea and tremors, my body fighting a war in secret. But with each dawn, I felt stronger, my resolve hardening. Ethan's concerned glances at my worsening condition were my confirmation that the performance was working. "Perhaps we should get a second opinion, Chloe," he'd suggest. his voice a perfect symphony of false sympathy. I would just shake my head, telling him I trusted him, and only him, to care for me. His smile would widen then, a predator's smile blinded by his own cleverness. As our 7th anniversary drew closer, I could feel Ethan's excitement mounting. He spent hours orchestrating the perfect evening, hand-selecting the restaurant, the table, the wine. Every detail was designed to be the flawless backdrop for his final act. The exquisite irony of him planning his own execution was a private, bitter source of amusement. My own preparations were also entering their final phase. The compound I had synthesized was elegant in its simplicity. It was swift, untraceable, and mimicked the symptoms of a massive cardiac event, a plausible end for someone with my documented failing health. I had tested the dosage on small animal subjects, perfecting its efficacy while fortifying my own resistance. Tonight, watching him so confidently order our meals, I can almost admire his dedication to the role. 7 years of marriage and the mask never once slipped. But then I remember the others. I remember their smiling faces in the photographs, and my heart turns to stone. The sommelier arrives with the wine, the vintage Bordeaux Ethan had chosen weeks ago. He insists on pouring it himself, the ever-attentive husband. His hands are rock-steady as he fills my glass, then his own, completely unaware that his perfect plan is about to be irrevocably shattered. I touch the small, cool vial concealed in my evening clutch. A promise. To new beginnings, he says, raising his glass high. If only he knew how right he was. The oak room at the Serafina hadn't changed in 7 years. The same opulent crystal chandeliers dripped light from the ceiling, casting a warm golden hue across the room. The same dark polished mahogany panels lined the walls. And our table, the intimate corner booth where Ethan first charmed his way into my life, was waiting. Table 17. Tonight it would bear witness to the end of our story. I had arrived 20 minutes early, telling the maitre d' I needed a moment to freshen up. He recognized me at once. "Mrs. Sterling, a pleasure as always." He greeted me with a warm smile. Mr. Sterling called ahead. "Everything is arranged to his exact specifications." I'm sure it is, I thought. My husband was nothing if not meticulous. As I waited, I casually scanned the room. A handful of other diners were scattered about. A family celebrating a birthday, a quiet couple by the fireplace, a table of businessmen in the center. It was perfect. Enough people to serve as witnesses to a normal evening, but none so close they could overhear the conversation that was to come. The table was set for a masterpiece of deception. Crisp white linen, gleaming silver, and 2 special crystal glasses that Ethan had brought from home. A sentimental touch, he had called it. They were the same glasses we had used to toast at our wedding, now repurposed for a far more permanent kind of vow. Ethan arrived at precisely 8 o'clock, a vision in a bespoke charcoal suit, his silver tie catching the light. He moved through the room with that same effortless confidence that had once made my pulse quicken. Now, I saw the mechanics of it, the practiced grace of a performer who knows all his best angles. "Sorry to keep you waiting, my love," he murmured, his lips brushing my cheek. The scent of his expensive cologne, once intoxicating, now smelled like decay. His eyes, those stormy gray pools, swept over me with an appreciative gleam. Stunning. Absolutely stunning. He sat, and the sommelier appeared almost instantly, presenting the bottle of Bordeaux with a flourish. Ethan went through the ritual of tasting, his eyes never leaving the deep, ruby-red liquid as it was poured. "Perfect," he declared, his voice rich with satisfaction. The sommelier retreated, leaving us alone in our perfectly set trap. I felt the reassuring weight of the small vial in my clutch. Timing was everything. Too soon and he might become suspicious. Too late and I might not get another chance. "Remember our first time here?" Ethan asked, his hand finding mine across the table. "You wore that blue dress. You were so nervous you almost knocked over the water glass." His thumb drew lazy circles on my skin, a gesture that used to make me melt. And look at us now, 7 years of perfect moments. I smiled, allowing a hint of nostalgia to soften my voice. You ordered that ridiculous champagne, even after I told you I preferred red wine. You said some moments just demand bubbles. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else, a lifetime ago. And I was right, wasn't I? He chuckled, his eyes crinkling. Just like I'm right about this wine. The perfect vintage for a perfect night. He lifted his glass, admiring its color against the candlelight. Everything about tonight had to be perfect. Our appetizers arrived. Foie gras for him, a delicate butternut squash soup for me. Ethan had, of course, ordered for me. You always loved their soup, he commented, watching me as I took the first spoonful. His attention to detail was a weapon, and he wielded it with surgical precision. As we ate, the air grew thick with unspoken things. Every bite, every sip, every casual remark was a step closer to the precipice. I saw Ethan check his watch again, the third time since he'd sat down. He was waiting. He was anticipating. The sheer irony of his impatience made the corner of my mouth twitch. The main courses were served. A perfectly seared Wagyu steak for him, a simple roasted chicken for me. You should have some of the steak, he urged, cutting off a piece and holding it out on his fork. It might be your last chance to taste Chef Antoine's masterpiece. The double meaning hung between us, thick and heavy. I politely refused, watching him savor his meal with a pleasure that was almost obscene. My own plate remained mostly untouched, perfectly in character for the frail woman I was pretending to be. I saw the flash of satisfaction in Ethan's eyes at my apparent lack of appetite. The crystal of my wine glass caught the light as I reached for it, the liquid within dark and full of promise. To my love, he had said. Soon the final act of his play would begin, and all his careful plotting would unravel like a cheap suit in a rainstorm. I raised my glass, my smile holding all the secrets of the last 6 months. To us, I whispered, and to perfect timing. Time seemed to stretch and warp, each second elongating as Ethan lifted his glass to mine. The crystal chimed, a single pure note that sounded like a death knell in the hushed opulence of the oak room. His confidence was a palpable force, a warmth that rolled across the table, the same warmth that had once felt like a safe harbor, and now only ignited the cold fire of my resolve. You've barely touched your food, Chloe, he observed, his brow furrowed with a perfect imitation of concern. The performance was breathtaking in its precision. The slight tilt of his head, the gentle, worried tone. I wondered how many times he had rehearsed it, how many other women had been the final audience for this tender display. I'm saving room for dessert, I replied, my voice deliberately soft, a little shaky. Exactly what he would expect from his increasingly fragile wife. You always did say their chocolate lava cake was to die for. A genuine smile touched my lips at the exquisite irony. Ethan leaned in, his fingers brushing mine on the white linen. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, his gray eyes locking onto mine with hypnotic force. Actually, my love, I have a confession. I took the liberty of arranging a little something special for dessert. A final surprise, you could say. How thoughtful, I murmured, watching him take another slow sip of his wine. My own pulse began to thrum, a steady, powerful beat. He swallowed, his throat working. Any moment now. You always did know how to make our anniversaries unforgettable. The candlelight glinted off the platinum band on his left hand. The one he claimed was a family heirloom. I wondered if it had once belonged to Jessica, or perhaps Emily. Soon it would just be another piece of evidence in a sealed bag. I was just thinking about our first night in this room, he continued, his tone becoming wistful. You were so innocent back then, so full of trust. Do you remember what you told me when I ordered that champagne? That some things are worth the extravagance, I recited, watching as a subtle haze began to film over his eyes. That life is too short not to celebrate the perfect moments. He blinked, a slow, languid motion. His hand, reaching for his water glass, had a distinct tremor. "You don't look well," I observed, my voice a perfect mirror of his earlier concern. "Perhaps the wine is a bit much for you. He tugged at the knot of his tie, a flicker of confusion crossing his features. "Something's not right. The wine, it tastes—" His words began to slur, the edges fraying as comprehension, cold and terrifying, began to dawn in his clouding gaze. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to the same intimate whisper he had used moments before. "Did you know, Ethan, that certain species in my conservatory can induce symptoms remarkably similar to a massive coronary event? Especially when combined with, say, the special little supplement you've been so lovingly adding to my tea each night." The color drained from his face. His fingers gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "What? Did you—" The question died in his throat as the full, horrifying truth crashed over him. "I found them, Ethan," I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice. "All of them. Jessica, Emily, Madison." I kept my voice perfectly level, watching him fight to keep his composure. Did they realize what was happening at the end? Did they look at you with this same expression of betrayal you're feeling right now? He tried to push his chair back, to stand, but his legs refused to obey. The other diners remained lost in their own worlds, their laughter and conversation a distant murmur, oblivious to the life and death drama unfolding in our corner. "Help," he rasped, but the word was a ghost of a sound, barely carrying across the table. "Shh," I soothed, reaching out to pat his hand, just as he had done to me so many times during my feigned illness. "Don't cause a scene, darling. It seems you're having a bad reaction to the wine. It happens, especially with these older vintages." Sweat beaded on his brow as he struggled to stay upright, his body betraying him. "You switched the glasses." "Oh, my love," I finished for him, allowing a small, triumphant smile to grace my lips. "I switched them back. You see, I've been building an immunity for months, that little nightcap you so thoughtfully prepared for me tonight. I've been taking gradually increasing doses of it ever since I found your stash in the study." Sheer horror bloomed in his eyes as the room began to tilt around him. I calmly signaled the waiter. My husband isn't feeling well," I explained, my voice trembling with perfectly pitched alarm. "I think the wine may have been too strong for him. Could you possibly help me get him to the car?" "Of course, madam," the waiter replied, already moving to Ethan's side. "Sir, allow me to assist you." I watched as they half-carried Ethan's uncooperative body through the restaurant, playing the part of the frantic, worried wife to an Oscar-worthy standard. His face was now a ghastly shade of gray, his breathing shallow and ragged. "Happy anniversary, my love," I whispered as we passed through the doors into the cool night air. "You were right. Some moments are absolutely worth the extravagance." The drive was silent, punctuated only by the sound of Ethan's shallow, ragged breaths. I didn't take the direct route home. Instead, I drove up into the hills overlooking the city, giving us the privacy we needed for our final conversation. The city lights spread out below us like a carpet of fallen stars, their glow intermittently illuminating his ashen face. "Pull over," he managed to gasp, his impeccably tailored suit now rumpled, his hair damp with sweat. "Hospital." I guided the car into a secluded scenic overlook, the very spot where we used to watch the sunset during those first deceptively innocent years. "No hospital tonight, Ethan," I said softly, my voice devoid of all emotion. "This is just between us." My hands were steady on the steering wheel, a stark contrast to the storm of rage and vindication that had been building inside me for months. "How?" he choked out, the single word a monumental effort. "How long?" "Have you known? Known about your plan for me tonight? or known about Jessica, Emily, and Madison? I turned in my seat to face him fully, savoring the sight of his perfect, handsome facade crumbling into ruin. I found your little secret 3 months ago. The false bottom in the desk wasn't nearly as clever as you thought. Though I have to say, keeping a trophy from each wife, that was a particularly poetic, if arrogant, touch. His eyes widened with dawning recognition. The ring, he breathed. Yes, Madison's ring. The one you told me belonged to your great-grandmother. I twisted it on my finger, watching it catch the moonlight. Was that the same story you told all of them? Did they all believe you as readily as I did? He fumbled for the door handle, but his motor skills were failing him. I watched him struggle, a detached observer, remembering all the nights I had fought against the creeping lethargy of his poison, forcing myself to walk, to think, to plan. Your letters were also a nice touch, I continued, my voice almost conversational. The ones you wrote to my family detailing my declining health, documenting my symptoms so carefully. I especially admired the concerned, detailed emails you sent to my doctor. You truly thought of everything, didn't you? Chloe? He whispered, my name a desperate plea. We can fix this, like you fixed things with the others? My laugh was a dry, humorless sound. Tell me, Ethan, did they beg? Did they try to reason with you as the poison stole the air from their lungs? Or did they never even see it coming? His breathing became a desperate, rattling gasp, pure panic warring with the toxin ravaging his system. I loved you. No, I stated flatly. You loved my inheritance. You loved my trust. You loved my naivety. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the small, encrypted USB drive. It's all here. The evidence of your prior marriages, the offshore accounts, the insurance policies, the meticulously transferred funds. Did you really think I wouldn't start asking questions when the symptoms began? You don't. Understand, he gasped, his head lolling back against the headrest. I had reasons. Oh, I understand perfectly. I tucked the USB drive into his inner jacket pocket. You're a collector. You collect women, their lives, their fortunes. Each one is a new acquisition to be enjoyed, then liquidated. But you made one fatal mistake this time. His eyes, though glazed with terror, remained fixed on me, a flicker of grudging admiration in their depths. What mistake? You taught me too well, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. I leaned in, brushing a damp strand of hair from his forehead, a gesture of mock tenderness. All those lessons about patience, about planning, about paying attention to the finest details, I learned from the master. Police, he managed to force out, the word barely audible. They'll find a tragic case of accidental food poisoning, I corrected him. A grieving widow who tried frantically to get her husband to the hospital, but he insisted on going home. After all, his documented health issues were bound to catch up with him eventually. I smiled as I saw the final piece click into place in his fading consciousness. You really did create the perfect cover story for me. You're just like me, he rasped, his final attempt to wound me. I leaned closer so he could see the cold, hard truth in my eyes. Oh no, darling, I'm much better. You did this for money. I did it for justice. For Jessica, for Emily, for Madison, and for the woman I used to be. The one who actually believed in happy endings. His breathing grew shallow, his manicured hands clutching at the expensive leather of the seat. I watched dispassionately as the master manipulator faced his final, powerless moments. One last thing, I whispered, holding up my phone. I found your timeline, the one detailing exactly how tonight was supposed to end for me. It's really quite a piece of work. I just made a few edits. A flicker of recognition in his eyes. His own plan, his perfect script, turned against him. The beautiful symmetry of it seemed to strike him just as the last of his consciousness slipped away. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Goodbye, my love, I said softly, watching his eyes finally glaze over and close. The police should be here any minute. After all, I have a tragic accident to report. The flashing red and blue lights of the emergency vehicles painted the scenic overlook in a chaotic, surreal ballet of color, dancing across Ethan's still, silent features. I stood a short distance away, wrapped in a coarse shock blanket, playing the part of the hysterical, grieving widow. I recounted the evening's events to a calm, steady-eyed detective named Sarah Morgan, my voice cracking with programmed perfection. He insisted we take the long way home, I explained through shuddering sobs. He said he felt unwell after the wine but wanted to see our favorite spot one last time. I should have just driven straight to the hospital. Detective Morgan's dark eyes observed me with a quiet, unreadable intensity. Mrs. Sterling, you can't blame yourself. The paramedics' initial assessment suggests a massive, sudden cardiac event. It can happen in an instant. She made a note in her small book. The restaurant and its suppliers will be thoroughly investigated, of course. I gave a numb nod, watching the coroner's team work with a detached, professional efficiency. The USB drive was safe in Ethan's jacket, a ticking time bomb of evidence waiting for the right person to find it. His phone, with its damning timeline, was in his other pocket. All the pieces of the puzzle were laid out, just waiting to be assembled. The following days were a carefully orchestrated blur of police statements, sympathetic visitors, and funeral arrangements. Ethan's family flew in, a collection of strangers I'd never met, all claiming a deep connection that had never existed outside of his fabricated backstory. They spoke of his kindness and generosity, sharing anecdotes that rang with the hollow sound of lies. He was always so committed to his charity work, a woman introduced as his cousin remarked at the wake, her eyes conspicuously dry. I wondered what her fee was for appearing, for adding another layer to his manufactured life. The investigation unfolded exactly as I had predicted. The restaurant's wine was tested, revealing trace elements of a rare, naturally occurring cardiotoxin found in a specific ornamental plant. My well-documented history of philanthropic work, including serving on the board of the city's largest hospital, meant my own knowledge was never called into question. Why would anyone suspect a woman who dedicated so much of her time and money to saving lives? A week after the funeral, Detective Morgan asked me to come down to the station. This time, there was no shock blanket. I wore a tailored black suit, a subtle armor for the final act. She had me sit in a small, quiet office. "Mrs. Sterling," she began, her voice gentle as she spread a series of items across the desk between us. "We found some things in your husband's possession that have raised some very serious questions. The USB drive and his phone lay there like trophies. I don't understand," I whispered, letting my eyes widen with confusion. "Are those Ethan's?" She nodded, her expression remaining carefully neutral. "They contain some disturbing information about previous marriages, large-scale financial transfers, multiple identities." Her eyes met mine, sharp and probing. "Did you have any idea your husband had been married before?" The wave of shock that washed over my face was real, not from the news, but from the sheer artistry of my own plan coming to fruition. "No," I choked out. "That's impossible. He told me. He always said I was his one and only." I let my voice break, reaching for the tissue box she had conveniently placed on the desk. "We've been able to confirm at least 3 prior marriages, Mrs. Sterling, all to women of considerable wealth, and all ending under highly suspicious circumstances." She pushed a printout across the desk, and we found this on his phone. It appears to be a timeline, a plan. I scanned the document I already knew by heart, letting horror slowly dawn on my features. These dates, these notes about my health. My hands began to tremble. "Detective, what are you saying? We believe your husband was planning to murder you that night," she said, her voice dropping. The wine from the restaurant had traces of a highly sophisticated poison. The same compound was found in a crystallized form inside this vial from his study. She leaned forward, her professional demeanor softening into something like sympathy. "Chloe, it seems you weren't just a witness to a tragic accident. You were the intended victim who miraculously survived." The weight of her words, the beautiful, cutting irony of them almost made me laugh. Instead, I buried my face in my hands and let out a series of racking, carefully crafted sobs. Detective Morgan came around the desk and placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "We have a lot more to investigate," she said softly, "but I want you to know that you are safe now. Whatever he had planned, it's over." I looked up at her through a veil of tears, seeing only compassion in her eyes. "Those other women," I whispered. "If I had only known. Could I have saved them?" "This is not your fault," she assured me, her voice firm. "Ethan Sterling was a master of deception. The evidence shows he spent years perfecting his methods. There's no way you could have known." But I did know, I thought, as she began to explain the next steps of the now sprawling investigation. I knew everything. I planned everything. I executed everything. The perfect ending to Ethan's perfect plan, just not the ending he had in mind. As I walked out of the police station, the afternoon sun felt warm on my face. Somewhere, I hoped, Jessica, Emily, and Madison could finally rest. Their names would be cleared, their stories told, and their families would finally have closure. And I would be remembered as the lucky one, the survivor who, by a twist of fate, had unknowingly brought a monster to justice. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of my villa in Antibes, watching the late afternoon sun cast a glittering path across the Mediterranean. The French Riviera had become my refuge, a world away from the sympathetic glances and hushed whispers that had followed me back home. Here, I was just another wealthy American widow, and the anonymity suited me perfectly. The investigation had concluded just as I'd orchestrated. Posthumous charges were filed against Ethan, his network of hired relatives was dismantled, and a scheduled email I had discovered on his laptop served as his final confession, bringing closure to the victims' families. I had become an unlikely friend to Jessica's sister, and together we had established a support network for the families affected by Ethan's reign of terror. It had become a surprising source of healing even for me. I sipped my wine, a crisp local rosé that tasted of sunlight and freedom. My garden here grew only fragrant lavender and climbing roses. No secrets, no hidden properties. Some tools, once their purpose is served, should be put away for good. The sound of footsteps on the terrace pulled me from my thoughts. Madame Sterling? Marco, my favorite waiter from the hotel restaurant, appeared with a bottle of water. "Will you be dining with us this evening?" I turned, studying him in the fading light. He was handsome, charming, and possessed that same careful, almost reverent attention to detail I had learned to recognize as a tool of the trade. "Actually, Marco," I said, a slow smile forming on my lips, "I was thinking of trying that new bistro you mentioned. Would you care to join me after your shift?" His own smile brightened instantly. "It would be my pleasure, madame." As he retreated, I caught my own reflection in the glass of the balcony doors. I looked older, yes, but my eyes held a new wisdom, a new clarity, and I was still a woman who attracted a certain kind of attention. Marco had been dropping subtle hints for weeks, each interaction feeling both spontaneous and meticulously staged. There were small inconsistencies in the stories he told about his past, little echoes of a song I knew by heart. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Ava Chen. The preliminary background check on Marco was attached, waiting to be read. I picked up the small moleskin notebook from the table beside me, the one where I'd been noting our interactions, documenting patterns, highlighting discrepancies. The practice felt disturbingly familiar. Had Ethan kept such notes? Had his cold, methodical planning become an inseparable part of me? The sky had deepened to a royal purple, the first stars appearing over the sea. Ethan's last words came back to me. "You're just like me." I wondered if he was more right than he knew. The skills I had been forced to learn, the patience, the foresight, the hawk-like attention to detail, they were his dark legacy, but they had also saved my life. I opened my laptop and began my own deep dive into Marco's history. Social media profiles that were a little too polished, an employment history with a few too many convenient gaps, a faint but discernible pattern of brief associations with wealthy, single women in various coastal towns. A slow, knowing smile curved my lips. Perhaps Ethan had taught me too well, or perhaps he had simply awakened a part of me that had always been dormant, the part that found a thrilling satisfaction in peeling back layers of deception, in seeing the truth behind a well-constructed mask. I went inside to get my evening bag, checking my reflection one last time. The black dress was simple and elegant, the pearls at my throat a quiet statement. In my clutch, nestled beside my lipstick and phone, was my small notebook and a tiny clear vial filled with a colorless liquid. Tools of a trade I thought I had retired. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. As I stepped inside, my reflection stared back from the mirrored walls. A woman who was no longer a victim, but not quite a hero. A survivor who had learned to play the game better than the masters. "Good evening, Madame Sterling," the attendant said with a nod. "Good evening," I replied, my smile holding secrets he could never imagine. "I have a feeling tonight is going to be very interesting." The doors slid shut, carrying me down to the lobby where Marco was waiting, completely unaware that he had chosen the wrong widow for his next performance. Some lessons, once learned, are impossible to forget, and some dances are so much more thrilling when both partners already know all the steps. The game wasn't over. It had just evolved, and so had I. End of story.